The Grand Galactic Summit filled the enormous Concordia station with noise and color. Representatives from 47 different alien species moved through the central atrium, their voices creating a strange symphony of clicks, whistles, and rumbling tones. The air smelled of exotic spices and unknown chemicals, a mixture of scents from dozens of worlds across the galaxy. Ambassador Lee stood alone near a curved viewport. She watched the others with careful eyes, noting how the Morellian delegates' crystalline headpieces caught the light, how the Vestari representatives' wings fluttered nervously when approached by the larger species. Earth was new to this gathering. Humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 30 years ago, barely a moment in galactic time. She sipped her drink slowly, a simple water, while most others consumed strange glowing liquids. Her unassuming gray uniform stood in stark contrast to the elaborate outfits around her. The other delegates mostly ignored her, seeing humans as unimportant newcomers. "The humans don't seem concerned," said Admiral Kong, his blue skin shimmering under the atrium lights as he spoke to his aide. The tall Eloran officer stood a full head above most other delegates, his ceremonial armor clicking softly as he moved. His aide, a smaller Eloran with bright green markings, glanced toward Ambassador Lee. "Why would they be? Their territory is small, their fleet smaller. They've barely mastered interstellar travel." Admiral Kong nodded slowly. "Still, I expected more reaction to the Vordax movements near their borders. The humans probably don't fully understand galactic politics yet," the aide replied with a dismissive gesture of his four-fingered hand. Across the chamber, General Kim of the Vordax Imperium stood with his officers around a floating star chart. The Vordax were an imposing species, their grayscaled skin and sharp facial ridges giving them a permanently aggressive appearance. Their military uniforms featured sharp angles and blood-red insignias that seemed designed to intimidate. General Kim pointed at several star systems on the map, his sharp claw tapping on points that glowed brighter with each touch. His voice was low, but carried a hint of excitement. "The trade routes through these systems will give us control over 15% more commerce," he told his officers. "And the mineral deposits in these outer planets will fuel our shipyards for decades." His chief strategist, Commander Hoon, leaned closer to the map. "The Elorans will protest, but they lack the military strength to stop us." "And the humans?" asked another officer, glancing toward Ambassador Lee. General Kim followed his gaze, his yellow eyes narrowing slightly. "Humans? They are no concern. Their ships are primitive, their weapons obsolete. They're so new to space travel they still get excited about finding a new comet." The other officers laughed, their scaled faces stretching into what passed for Vordax smiles. "Are all preparations complete?" Kim asked, returning his attention to the star chart. Commander Hoon nodded, his voice dropping lower. "Yes, General. The battle group will move into position within the next 36 hours. The Emperor's Fist leads the formation, along with 12 destroyer-class vessels." General Kim looked pleased. "Excellent. The council meeting tomorrow will be interesting. We will announce our protective action after our ships are already in position." Across the room, Ambassador Lee took another small sip of her water. Her face remained calm and neutral, giving no hint that she had heard every word of the Vordax conversation. The enhancement implants in her ears, hidden beneath her short black hair, had picked up every syllable despite the noise of the crowded atrium. She set her empty glass down on a passing server drone and touched the small communicator hidden in her sleeve. The device vibrated once in acknowledgement, sending an encrypted message back to Earth Command. No words were necessary, the signal itself was enough to initiate the protocols they had prepared months ago. As the Galactic Summit's chimes announced the evening reception, Ambassador Lee finally moved away from her quiet corner. She walked confidently toward the main hall, passing between groups of aliens who barely noticed her presence. Behind her calm expression, she calculated how many hours remained before everything changed. The Vordax would learn soon enough that humanity's modest appearance hid something far more dangerous. The assembly hall of the Concordia station gleamed under soft blue lights. Thousands of delegates from across the galaxy sat in rising tiers that formed a perfect circle. In the center stood a round platform where speakers addressed the gathering. The air felt tense as officials and diplomats took their assigned seats. General Kim of the Vordax Imperium stepped onto the central platform. His tall figure cast a long shadow across the polished floor. The scales on his face caught the light as he moved, giving him a menacing appearance. His red military uniform, adorned with badges and medals, made a stark contrast against the neutral colors of the chamber. Esteemed delegates, his voice echoed through the vast space. The security of the Galactic Rim requires decisive action. He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the assembly. The Vordax Imperium will establish protective outposts in the following systems. With a wave of his clawed hand, he activated the massive holographic display above the platform. A map of the galaxy appeared, spinning slowly until it focused on a section of the outer rim. 12 star systems began to glow bright red, pulsing ominously against the blue background. Murmurs spread through the chamber as delegates recognized the highlighted systems. 3 of these systems sat directly on the border of human-controlled space. Many delegates began to whisper to each other, some pointing at the map with expressions of concern. Ambassador Choi of the Aloran Confederation stood up immediately. Her silver robes shimmered as she rose, the traditional blue markings on her face darkening with emotion. This is a violation of the Galactic Charter. Her voice carried clearly across the hall. These are neutral zones designated by ancient treaties. The Aloran Confederation strongly protests this illegal action. Several other delegates stood as well, voicing their agreement. The chamber grew louder as more species joined the protest. General Kim raised his hand, and the hall quieted somewhat. A cold smile spread across his scaled face, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "We understand your concerns," he said with mock politeness. "The Vordax Imperium welcomes any species with concerns to discuss them directly with our fleet commanders, who, as it happens, are already moving into position." This announcement caused even more commotion. Many delegates began checking their communication devices, confirming the Vordax fleet movements. In the midst of this chaos, a strange quiet began to spread from one section of the chamber. Delegates turned to see Ambassador Lee of Earth walking toward the central platform. Her simple gray uniform looked plain next to the elaborate outfits of other species. Her walk was steady and unhurried. The unexpected movement caught everyone's attention. Humans rarely spoke during these sessions. In fact, most galactic powers considered Earth a minor planet, barely worth noticing. The human delegation usually sat quietly, observing and learning. Ambassador Lee reached the central platform and stood opposite General Kim. Though she was much smaller than the Vordax general, something in her posture made her seem equally imposing. "The United Earth government has a simple message," she stated, her voice calm but carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. She didn't raise her voice, yet somehow her words cut through the remaining whispers. "Any military incursion into human-claimed systems will be met with immediate and decisive force." A moment of stunned silence followed her words. Then, General Kim barked a laugh that echoed through the chamber. Other Vordax delegates joined in, their harsh laughter spreading like a wave. "Ambassador," Kim said, his yellow eyes fixed on Lee, "your species' bravado is admirable but misplaced." He gestured dramatically to the assembled delegates. "Perhaps humans should stick to what they do best, entertaining the galaxy with their amusing media productions." More laughter followed, though not all delegates joined in. Some watched with curious expressions, others with concern. Ambassador Lee didn't respond to the mockery. She simply bowed slightly, her face showing no emotion at all. Then she turned and walked back to her seat with the same measured pace. The human delegation remained perfectly still as discussions erupted around them. No one noticed the small communication device hidden in Ambassador Lee's sleeve, blinking once to confirm that her message had been received by Earth Command. No one saw the slight smile that briefly crossed her face as she sat down. The galaxy would soon learn what those simple words really meant. Captain Park stood on the bridge of the Aloran observation vessel Vigilant, his blue hands clasped behind his back as he watched the main viewscreen. The stars of the Proxima system glittered against the black void of space. His ship maintained a safe distance from the unfolding events, just close enough to observe but far enough to avoid being seen as a threat. "Magnify Sector 4, he ordered quietly. The screen shifted, focusing on the approaching Vordax battle group. The sight was impressive even to his experienced eyes. 13 warships moved in perfect formation, their angular hulls painted the deep red of the Vordax Imperium. At the center of the formation flew the massive dreadnought Emperor's Fist, a vessel nearly 2 kilometers long. Its surface bristled with weapon ports and sensor arrays. "They certainly didn't bring that fleet for a peaceful mission," remarked his first officer, Commander Jean, her blue skin darker than Park's, marked with the silver patterns of her northern clan. Captain Park nodded. "The Vordax never do anything peacefully if they can help it." He turned to his sensor officer. "Any sign of human vessels?" The young officer, Lieutenant Song, studied his readouts carefully. His fingers danced across the control panel as he fine-tuned the ship's advanced sensors. "None, Captain," Song finally replied, looking up from his station. "I'm detecting a few automated beacons and a small research station in the fourth planet's orbit, but it appears to be evacuated. No life signs. No active defense systems." He frowned slightly. "It's as if they abandoned the system completely." "That doesn't make sense," Commander Jean said quietly. "The human ambassador made such a bold claim at the summit. Why would they leave this system undefended?" Captain Park stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Perhaps they were bluffing. Or perhaps they never expected the Vordax to move so quickly." On the viewscreen, the Vordax ships had entered the heart of the system, spreading out to surround the fourth planet. The Emperor's Fist took position at the center of their formation, looking like a predator ready to strike. "They're broadcasting, Captain," announced the communications officer. "All frequencies, open channel." "Let's hear it," Park ordered. The harsh voice of General Kim filled the bridge. Even through the translator, his tone carried unmistakable arrogance. "This is General Kim of the Vordax Imperium aboard the Emperor's Fist. By authority of the Vordax Imperium, this system now falls under our protection. Any resistance will be met with immediate destruction. All current installations must submit to Vordax authority within 1 standard hour or be eliminated." Captain Park exchanged glances with Commander Jean. Interesting that he uses the word protection when no one asked for it. "Standard Vordax procedure," Jean replied. "Claim to protect what you wish to plunder." The Vordax message continued to repeat as their ships moved into strategic positions around the system. Weapon systems came online, glowing points of energy visible even from the Vigilant's distant position. "Captain, we're not the only observers," Lieutenant Song reported. "I'm detecting at least 7 other vessels at the system's edge. Representatives from the Galactic Council, most likely." Park nodded. "Everyone wants to see what happens when the mighty Vordax challenge the newcomer humans." His voice carried a hint of sadness. "I fear they're about to witness a slaughter. The humans should have evacuated while they had the chance." On the viewscreen, the Vordax ships began deploying smaller craft toward the research station and the system's planets. General Kim's voice continued its broadcast. "By authority of the Vordax Imperium, this system now falls under our protection. Any resistance will be." "Captain!" Lieutenant Song suddenly shouted, his eyes wide as he stared at his sensor readings. His fingers flew across his console, recalibrating the instruments. "Massive energy signature detected. It's unlike anything I've ever seen." The bridge crew froze, all eyes turning to the viewscreen. At first, there was nothing visible. Then, the space directly in front of the Emperor's Fist began to shimmer, like heat rising from a desert floor. "What is that?" Commander Jean whispered. Lieutenant Song's voice shook slightly. "Something's materializing, Captain." "Something big." Captain Park gripped the railing in front of him as he leaned forward. The shimmering intensified, and within it, a solid shape began to take form. First an outline, vague and indistinct, then rapidly gaining definition. "Magnify that area," Park ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. The viewscreen zoomed in on the distortion. The Vordax ships were already reacting, their formation breaking as they attempted to move away from the unknown phenomenon. "By the ancestors," breathed Commander Jean as the object fully materialized. "What is that?" Captain Park stared in disbelief. Where empty space had been moments before, there now floated a ship. A human ship, but unlike any vessel he had ever seen before. The space before the Vordax fleet shimmered and distorted like a mirage in a desert. Where moments ago there had been only empty space, a massive shape began to take form. The human battleship Defiance emerged from nothingness, its appearance so sudden and impossible that many of the watching aliens gasped or made sounds of alarm in their various languages. The vessel was enormous. It dwarfed even the Emperor's Fist, which until now had been considered one of the largest warships in the galaxy. The Defiance stretched nearly 4 kilometers from end to end, its hull a deep black that seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. No lights blinked on its surface. No visible weapons protruded from its smooth exterior. It simply existed there, like a hole cut into space itself. "By the ancestors," whispered Captain Park aboard the Vigilant. It was there all along. His blue hands gripped the edge of his command console, knuckles turning pale. "They must have some kind of cloaking technology we've never seen before." "Impossible," breathed Commander Jean beside him. "Our sensors would have detected something that size, no matter how well hidden." "Yet there it is," Park replied, his voice filled with wonder and fear. Across the Proxima system, on the observation decks of 20 different vessels representing a dozen different species, similar scenes played out. Stunned silence gave way to frantic activity as sensor officers rushed to record everything about this unprecedented event. Scientists shouted orders, diplomats dictated urgent messages to their governments, and military officers watched with wide eyes, suddenly reassessing everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. In the control room of a Zentari research vessel, Chief Scientist Ryu turned to her assistant. "Are you getting all this? Every frequency, every reading?" "Yes, Chief," the assistant replied, fingers flying across multiple control panels. "But our instruments are struggling to make sense of it. That ship's hull material isn't in our database." On the bridge of the Emperor's Fist, General Kim stood frozen, his yellow eyes fixed on the viewscreen that showed the impossible human ship. His officers waited for orders, their scaled faces showing rare expressions of uncertainty. A communications officer finally broke the silence. "General, we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel." "Put it through," Kim ordered, his voice strained. A calm, measured human voice filled the bridge. "Vordax vessels, this is Captain Han of the Earth Defense Force's Battleship Defiance. You have entered protected human space. You will power down your weapons and withdraw immediately." General Kim's momentary shock quickly transformed into rage. His sharp teeth clenched as his body stiffened. "They dare to threaten the Vordax Imperium," he snarled. "Fire all batteries. Destroy that monstrosity." His officers rushed to comply. Throughout the Vordax fleet, weapon systems charged and locked onto the human vessel. Within seconds, hundreds of energy beams and missiles launched toward the Defiance. It was an awesome display of firepower, enough to level a small continent. The observers throughout the system watched, many certain they were about to witness the destruction of the human ship, impressive as it was. But the attack never reached its target. Approximately 3 kilometers from the Defiance's hull, the entire Vordax barrage simply disappeared. Energy beams vanished. Missiles winked out of existence. It was as if they had fired into a void. "What just happened?" Captain Park demanded on the Vigilant. Lieutenant Song shook his head in disbelief. "Their weapons, they just stopped existing. I've never seen anything like it. It's not any shield technology one recognize." On the Emperor's Fist, General Kim was shouting. "Fire again. All weapons. Maximum power." A second barrage launched toward the Defiance. Again, all weapons simply disappeared before reaching the human ship. Then, the Defiance began to move. Slowly, deliberately, it positioned itself directly in front of the Emperor's Fist. From recessed ports along its hull, small, glowing blue projectiles emerged. They pulsed with strange energy as they shot toward the Vordax vessels. "Evasive maneuvers," General Kim ordered, but it was too late. The blue projectiles passed through the Vordax shields as if they weren't there. They struck with surgical precision, not at critical life support or crew areas, but at propulsion systems, weapon banks, and power cores. Throughout the Vordax fleet, lights flickered and died. Engines shut down. Weapon systems went dark. What followed was not the expected slaughter but a demonstration of perfect precision. The Defiance moved methodically through the Vordax formation, firing its strange weapons at each vessel in turn. Not a single ship was destroyed. Not a single crew member was harmed. Instead, each Vordax vessel was systematically disabled. In 11 minutes, Captain Park timed it on his personal device. The mighty Vordax battle group had been reduced to drifting, powerless hulks. They could have destroyed them all, Commander Jean whispered. But they chose not to. Captain Park nodded slowly. Perhaps that's the most frightening message of all. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began with unusual tension. The Grand Chamber that normally hosted carefully planned meetings now buzzed with urgent whispers and nervous movements. Representatives from nearly 100 worlds packed the tiered seating, many having arrived on rushed transport ships. At the center of the chamber stood Ambassador Lee of Earth, her simple gray uniform now viewed with new respect and a touch of fear. The images of the Defiance neutralizing the entire Vordax battle fleet had spread throughout the galaxy in mere hours. The council chair, an ancient Zentari with pale green skin and 4 arms, leaned forward on his elevated platform. His voice carried a tremble that those who had known him for centuries had never heard before. "How long have you had this technology?" he demanded, all diplomatic pleasantries forgotten. Ambassador Lee stood calmly, her posture relaxed. She looked smaller than most of the delegates, yet somehow filled the room with her presence. "The United Earth Defense Force currently maintains 14 vessels of the Defiance class," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Our stealth and shield technologies were perfected 15 years ago. The first ship of this class was completed 12 years ago." A wave of murmurs spread through the chamber. Many delegates checked their translation devices, certain they had misheard. "Impossible," shouted General Kim from the Vordax section. His scales had lost some of their shine, and his uniform lacked the usual decorations. His face flushed with a mix of humiliation and anger. "Your species was barely reaching your own moon 60 years ago. You were splitting atoms when the rest of us had already colonized dozens of worlds." Several delegates nodded in agreement. The timeline made no sense. No species had ever advanced so quickly. Ambassador Choi of the Aloran Confederation stood slowly, her silver robes gleaming under the chamber lights. "Perhaps," she said thoughtfully, "that is precisely why we failed to anticipate this. No other species in recorded history has advanced so rapidly." She looked around the chamber. "We observed their progress, noted their achievements, but measured them against our own development patterns. We were wrong." Ambassador Lee nodded slightly to Choi before touching a control on her wristband. A large holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber, showing images from Earth's history. Scenes of warfare played out ancient battles with primitive weapons, then modern conflicts with increasingly destructive force. "Our path to the stars was not peaceful," Lee explained as the images shifted. "For millennia, humans fought one another, driving technological advancement through conflict. Our greatest scientific leaps came during our most terrible wars. The images changed to show the unification of Earth, the first space colonies, the development of faster-than-light travel. When we finally unified," she continued, "we knew peace was preferable, but preparedness essential. We remembered our history. We would not allow ourselves to be vulnerable again." The chamber remained silent as the implications sank in. The Defiance and its sister ships were not just weapons of war, they were the product of a species that understood war on a fundamental level. As the emergency session concluded hours later, new treaties were hastily drafted. The Vordax representatives, stripped of their usual arrogance, agreed to respect established boundaries. A dozen smaller species, previously ignored by the major powers, sought immediate diplomatic ties with Earth. In the station's observation lounge after the session, Captain Park stood with ambassadors from 3 different worlds. Through the massive viewport, they could see the Defiance positioned near the station, preparing to depart. "They're terrifying," said one diplomat, a tall insectoid whose translucent wings shivered slightly. "A species that can advance so quickly, build such weapons, who knows what they'll create next? No, corrected Captain Park, his eyes fixed on the massive black ship. They're survivors. They evolved on a world that tried to kill them, then spent thousands of years trying to kill each other. He turned to face the others. They're not just technically advanced, they understand conflict on a fundamental level that we can barely comprehend. The Defiance began to move away from the station, its engines glowing with strange blue energy that defied conventional physics. As they watched, the massive ship seemed to shimmer, then fade, disappearing completely from view despite being in plain sight just moments before. And they chose to disable rather than destroy, Captain Park added quietly. That, perhaps, is the most important lesson of all. They understand war so well that they know exactly how to avoid it. The gathered diplomats stood in silence, watching the now empty space where the most powerful warship in the galaxy had been. Each wondered what this new understanding would mean for the future of all their worlds.